There is a specific feeling that I think most of us have been carrying around for the last few years. It's not panic, exactly. It's something deeper. It's that gnawing intuition you get when you look at your grocery bill or you look at your tax return and then you turn on the news and the two realities just don't match up. For a long time, we were told that if we just worked hard, played by the rules, and paid our share, the system would hold up its end of the bargain. But lately, have you noticed how the social contract feels thin, like it's fraying at the edges? I've been thinking about this a lot. We walk around our cities and things look normal on the surface. The buildings are standing, the traffic lights work, but underneath there is this tremor. It's the vibration of a machine that is shaking itself apart because the people in charge took the safety guards off. I want to talk to you today, not as a partisan, but as an American who is frankly exhausted by the gaslighting. We're going to discuss what is actually happening to the American Treasury, to our borders, and to the rule of law. And I'm going to be honest with you, some of this is going to be uncomfortable to hear. It certainly makes my blood boil. We aren't just talking about government waste. We are used to that. We are talking about the industrial scale looting of the American taxpayer, facilitated by a political class that decided it was more important to be nice than to be competent. We're going to look at the massive fraud schemes that have finally been exposed. We're going to talk about the states that are currently in a standoff with the federal government because they refuse to tell us where our money went. And we are going to talk about the difficult, necessary correction that began in 2025, the return of law and order that half the country is cheering for and the other half is protesting. But before we get to the numbers, I want you to ask yourself, when was the last time you felt like the government treated your tax dollars with the same respect you had to have to earn them? Keep that question in mind, because what we found out recently changes everything. Let's start with the money. As conservatives, we often talk about the debt, but this is different. This is about theft. Recently, the veil was lifted on a series of financial scandals that frankly stagger the imagination. You might have heard whispers of the stories about EBT cards with balances higher than a mostly annual salary, or nonprofits springing up overnight to claim millions in subsidies. There was a case out of the Midwest, specifically Minnesota, but it's not unique to them that serves as the perfect case study for this rot. We're talking about a fraud scheme estimated at upwards of $8 billion. Let's pause on that number. $8 billion. To put that in perspective, that is enough money to revitalize the infrastructure of entire cities. And it was siphoned away through programs that were designed to feed children and help the disabled. This is what angers me the most. I believe in a safety net. I think most Republicans do. We want to help those who genuinely cannot help themselves. But what we saw here was predators looking at a weak system and realizing the door was unlocked. Here's how it worked. You had a network of nonprofits claiming to serve thousands of meals a day to children who didn't exist. They created lists of names using random number generators or stolen identities. And the state government, the bureaucracy that we pay to watch the door, they just kept cutting the checks. Why? This is the part that I find fascinating and terrifying. They didn't stop it because they were afraid. Whistleblowers, good, honest civil servants actually tried to flag this. They said, hey, these numbers are physically impossible. And they were told to back down. They were silenced. Why? Because the fraudsters had wrapped themselves in the cloak of social justice. To question them was to be accused of racism or xenophobia or hating the poor. The political class in these states was so terrified of bad PR, so afraid of the Twitter mob, that they allowed billions of dollars to be stolen rather than ask a hard question. And it gets worse. When investigators finally pulled the thread, they didn't just find isolated criminals. They found photos, they found campaign donations, they found that the very people stealing this money were maxing out contributions to the politicians who were supposed to be overseeing them. Now, I'm not saying every politician involved was criminal, but I am saying they were complicit in their negligence. They created an ecosystem where fraud was easier than honest work. As a conservative, I look at this and I see the ultimate betrayal of the working man and woman. You wake up at 6 a.m., you commute, you pay your taxes, and then you watch that money get funneled into a criminal enterprise that buys luxury cars and overseas real estate, all while hiding behind the shield of charity. It's grotesque. And for a long time, we didn't know the scale of it. We just felt the deficit growing. But now the receipts are out. So the fraud in the Midwest was the earthquake. But the aftershocks revealed something even more disturbing about the structural integrity of our union. When the federal government, specifically the Department of Agriculture and new auditors appointed to clean this mess up, finally said, enough. They issued a very simple demand. They said to the states, show us your data. Reasonable, right? If I give you money, I get to see the receipt. That's how it works in business. That's how it works in your household. Around 30 states said, sure, and handed over the files. And what we found in those files was a disaster, dead people collecting checks, people collecting welfare in 4 different states simultaneously. It was a mess, but at least those states were willing to fix it. But here is the geopolitical crisis. 21 states refused. They simply said no. They claimed privacy concerns or overreach, but let's call it what it is. They were hiding the body. When a state government refuses to be transparent about federal funds, it is essentially declaring that it doesn't answer to the taxpayer. This created a constitutional standoff that we are still navigating. You had the federal government threatening to cut off funding, and state governors claiming they were being persecuted. But you have to ask yourself, if you have nothing to hide, why fight the audit? I suspect the answer lies in what those audits would reveal about their voter rolls and their demographics. This brings us to the most sensitive, but perhaps the most critical part of this entire unraveling: the intersection of the welfare state and our broken immigration system. For years, if you pointed out that mass migration from unstable regions was putting a strain on our social services, you were shouted down, you were called hateful. But I'm a data guy. I like numbers because numbers don't care about your feelings. The data that did leak out showed that in some specific immigrant communities, populations from conflict zones that were brought here without proper vetting rate of long-term dependency on government assistance was hovering between 40 and 50%. This is not a judgment on those human beings. If you offer free money, people will take it. That's human nature. The judgment falls on us, on our leaders. We imported a permanent underclass that the American taxpayer is expected to subsidize indefinitely. We moved away from the Ellis Island model, where you came here to build, to work, to struggle and succeed, and moved toward a model where you come here to be a client of the state. And who benefits from that? The political party that promises to keep the checks coming. It's a harvesting operation. They harvest votes, and they harvest tax dollars to pay for it. And for those of us who believe in the Republic, watching this happen was like watching a slow-motion car crash. But then something shifted. History acts like a pendulum. You can only push it so far in the direction of insanity before it swings back hard toward reality. In early 2025, a new administration took a look at this wreckage and decided to pull the emergency brake. This is the period we are living through right now, and it is fascinating to watch the media try to spin it. The federal government implemented new travel restrictions. Now, the headlines screamed ban and discrimination. But if you looked at the actual policy, it was based on a simple premise, reciprocity and verification. They looked at countries, about 30 of them initially, that had no functioning government records, places where you can't call a police station to check a background because the police station was blown up 10 years ago. And the administration said, if we cannot verify who you are, you cannot come in. It's common sense. You don't let a stranger sleep in your living room just because he says he's a nice guy. You ask for ID. This wasn't about malice. It was about national survival. You cannot have a welfare state and open borders simultaneously. Milton Friedman told us that decades ago, and we ignored him. We are finally relearning that lesson. Along with these restrictions came the enforcement, and this is where the rubber met the road. We started seeing federal operations in sanctuary cities, places like New Orleans, Minneapolis, and Chicago, cities that had previously told federal agents to get lost. I want to paint a picture for you of what these operations actually look like, because the news showed you one thing, and the reality was another. The news showed you activists screaming, they showed you crying families, and look, I'm a father. I take no joy in seeing families disrupted. It is a tragedy, but it is a tragedy caused by the leaders who invited people here under pretenses and refused to enforce the law for decades. But what the cameras didn't show you was the reaction of the legal residents in those neighborhoods. There is a story from a federal agent in New Orleans that stuck with me. He was conducting an arrest of a foreign national who was a known gang member, someone who had been terrorizing the block. As the agents were walking him to the vehicle, the activists were screaming, "Fascists," and "Go home." But an elderly woman, an African-American lady who had lived on that block for 40 years, walked up to the agent. She didn't shout. She just squeezed his arm and whispered, "Thank you. We've been scared to go out at night." That is the reality the media ignores. The primary victims of illegal immigration and criminal gangs are not the wealthy liberals in gated communities. They are the working-class families in these neighborhoods. Restoring the rule of law is the most compassionate thing you can do for a community. It removes the predators. It restores order. Naturally, the backlash to this restoration of order has been hysterical. We saw politicians, members of Congress, even showing up to these enforcement sites, engaging in what I can only call performance art. There was one incident involving a congresswoman claiming she was assaulted or pepper sprayed by agents. She put on a great show for Instagram, but then the body cam footage came out. And what did we see? We saw her screaming at agents who were standing still. We saw her manufacturing a crisis for likes and clicks. This is the difference between the serious people and the unserious people. The serious people are trying to fix a broken engine. The unserious people are dancing on the hood while the car is on fire. We are currently in a battle between order and chaos. That is what this comes down to. The chaos faction believes that borders are optional, that theft is just redistribution, and that requiring identification is oppression. The order faction, and I count myself and probably you among them, believes that a nation is defined by its laws, its borders, and its fiscal integrity. We are seeing the 21 states that refuse to share data slowly buckling under the pressure. Why? Because the federal money spigot is being turned off. And it turns out their moral outrage disappears pretty quickly when they can't balance their budgets. This is what accountability looks like. It's not pretty. It's messy. It causes protests. But it is necessary. So where do we go from here? I believe we are at an inflection point. If this correction holds, if we continue to deport the criminals, audit the welfare rolls, and secure the border, we can save this country. We can return to a place where the American dream is solvent, where your tax dollars build roads and schools instead of funding fraud rings. But we have to be vigilant. The forces that benefited from the corruption, the NGOs, the corrupt politicians, the fraudsters, they are not going to give up easily. They have a lot of money, and they have the media on their side. They will try to make you feel guilty for demanding law and order. They will call you names. They will try to gaslight you into believing that you are the problem for noticing the theft. Do not let them. I want you to remember that the silent majority is with you. The grandmother in New Orleans is with you. The taxpayer in Minnesota who just wants his money used for actual charity is with you. We are watching the dam break, but for the first time in a long time, the water is being channeled in the right direction. We are cleaning the house. I'm optimistic, perhaps for the first time in years, because once you see the truth, once you see the numbers, the fraud, and the cynicism of the people in charge, you can't unsee it, and you can't go back. The age of ignoring the warning signs is over. Now, the work of rebuilding begins. I want to hear from you in the comments. I read them. Tell me, do you feel this shift happening in your town? Are you seeing the return of order, or is the chaos still winning where you live? Let's keep this conversation going, because the only way we lose is if we stop paying attention. Thank you for watching.